Hi, beautiful souls. Welcome. Welcome back. I wanted to take an opportunity today to revisit a conversation that I had last Tuesday. And that was talking a little bit about a series of workshops that I'm teaching called Tarot Through the Planets. And we had our first workshop already and looked at cards discussing the moon and all of the correspondences with the moon in the tarot. And this series is continuing this upcoming Saturday, 9 a.m. Pacific, 3-hour workshop. You can register. The link is in the description below for the workshop on Saturday or for the entire series. And of course, you will have access to the pre-recorded video of the first episode, which you would have missed. In this series, particularly on Saturday, we're going to be looking at Venus and all of her lovely correspondences. And the reason that I entitled this video was how to amp up your love readings or how to amp up your relationship readings, is that through an understanding of the planets and how the astrological associations have been built in to the tarot through the Golden Dawn. And this is the structure that I'm working with because I know there are different paradigms to work with in studying the tarot. But this one is the lens that I have been studying most recently and going deeper and deeper and deeper down this rabbit hole. And I just think that in deepening my own awareness, I have been able to see correspondences I didn't previously see in cards and expand my readings in a way that I never have before. Now, Venus, we would assume that is connected to cards of love, such as the Two of Cups. This is the Bone Stone and Earth Flesh Tarot. Hi, Emma. Welcome, Tamian. And perhaps even in a card such as the Lover's card. But the Lover's card is not connected. Lover's card is connected with the astrological sign of Gemini, and this is not connected to the planet Venus. And so by becoming more aware of the planetary associations and the cards that are ruled by Venus, we have an opportunity to look at our relationship readings in a new way. And the idea, and Venus is not just about relationships. Venus is about beauty and the arts. It is about our sexuality. It is about abundance. And I think in regards to relationship with business, I think this is a very important energy and a perspective to have when it comes to the development of partnerships and relationships and so forth. And so we turn to the planets and we look at where they show up in the tarot. And the cards that I pulled for you today, and by the way, this is a reshoot. I did this exact video last week and I was using a different tarot deck. I've taken that down because the sound was just atrocious. And so that's why I'm redoing this right now. But I think we can really begin to look at certain cards in a new light. This is, again, from the Bone Stone Tarot. This is the Four of Wands. And in this particular Four of Wands, we see a bond. We see a bond between two feminine figures, the crone and the maiden, and the symbol of the rose appearing in the hair. There's another rose in the card as well too. And while I don't believe that Avalon Cameron talks about this in her guidebook, it's been a while since I read it, so I would have to go back. But I think it's kind of beautiful how we can feel the energy of Venus in this card. And Perhaps her challenge, and looking at this card, which is ruled by Mars, we see the color of Mars in the background. Now, Venus does not do well in this particular astrological sign of Aries, but we see her being the best version of herself that she can be in a place where she is uncomfortable. And this may be the card of the wedding. I could very well see this young woman preparing for her ceremony. And I think even though this card quite commonly in most Waite-Smith decks is associated with weddings, there's a lot more we could build into this, understanding the influence of Venus in these cards. If we look at the decanic minors in the zodiacal wheel, Venus touches 5 different cards. And each of those cards we can awaken, we can open a conversation as to what her influence is there and where do we see her, either in her creative power, in the growth of her, the dynamic, her dynamic feminine anima energy, or perhaps in her detriment. And all of the planets, of course, both have light and shadow qualities. And you could call them creative and destructive. And I think this is a beautiful way to deepen your awareness of how to work with this energy. So if we're looking to Aquarius season and the 5 of Swords, I think this is an important discussion to have, because often we find ourselves, and I use the phrase painted into a corner in the tarot, when we look at a card and only consider perhaps language, mind, perhaps the number 5, and bring in an association to the Hierophant, which is in multiple ways a possible correspondence, because the Hierophant, the card for Taurus is also ruled by Venus. So not only do these 2 cards have a connection through numerology, they also have a Venusian correspondence. And with this awareness, we can find more vocabulary, we can take readings in a different direction, and we can become more aware of the depth and the web of readings. Now, if you like to do spreads such as a 9-card portrait spread, or even in a Celtic cross, a spread that takes up some room on the table, one of the layers that you can add to that reading is to go, okay, well, let's look at the lunar cards. How many lunar cards do we have? And because last month, we were looking at cards associated with the moon, which of course has a strong, receptive, feminine energy, as does Venus, we're going to be looking at where these 2 planets double up and how we can weave the story of this strong feminine energy. So it's just really cool, and I love it when this happens. Okay, so we not only look at the decanic minors that are associated with Venus, but we'll talk a little bit about the majors that are associated with her. And most of you will be familiar with the Empress, because in the Waite-Smith deck, we see the Empress in a heart, the Venus sign in a heart on the front of the Empress card. This again is the Bone Stone Tarot. But this is the card that is most, I think, commonly known as connected to the sign of Venus. But we have two other majors, as I mentioned, the Hierophant, as well as the card for Libra, the Justice card. And I find it really interesting, the strong feminine energy that has been drawn into this deck. Now, another great thing that these planetary correspondences get around is that we don't need to be concerned with whether justice is 8 or justice is 11, because Venus rules justice regardless of its number. So that is not an issue when we're looking at this correspondence. But what I have taken from this layer of studying is that, yes, this is specific to the Golden Dawn, and it may not be something that most deck creators build into their artwork, but a lot of this happens intuitively, and sometimes it happens quite intentionally, but is not discussed in the guidebook. I was at a workshop with Emily Carding. The last one I attended was the one for this guidebook, for this deck, the Transparent Oracle. And one of the things that she said was, I don't like to spoon feed the people who buy my deck. So she gives just enough information so you know which direction she's going, but she doesn't want to give away everything, because there are layers to be intuited, and there's different directions that one can go based on experience, different things that we have studied. So I really appreciate that. And it's funny because I find her guidebook very, very thorough. There's not a lot of room for going in different directions. So it's definitely a guidebook that's worth reading. And I will, by the way, be going live on Jonathan Daly's channel next week, and I'll be sure to share it. Yeah, so I'm very excited to meet with Emily Carding again. But what I'm saying here is that, and the reason I'm showing you the bone stone is because whether it is intentional, intuitive, or just sort of happens by accident, we have a lot of planetary symbols showing up in the cards. So we begin these workshops looking at keywords that are associated with the given planet, looking at those in terms of keywords that enhance and support, as opposed to keywords that show the planet in its detriment, that don't support one's soul journey, right? That often are described as shadow keywords. Also, there's an abundance of neutral keywords. So it's not just good and bad, and there's nuances to all of that. So that's sort of where we begin, look at a little bit of the mythology and where we see the mythology in the tarot specifically, and then start to look at the myriad of cards. So first of all, the 5 decanic minors, and then we'll bring in the minors that are associated with each of these cards. So the Hierophant is a fixed sign, and all of the fixed signs are associated with 5, 6, and 7 of their suit. So we have a look at those cards and where Venus shows up in Taurus season. And if you have any Taurian friends, you'll know about that, those earthy qualities, those very luxuriant, sexy, voluptuous, there's a card in the, actually, I'm going to pull out Tarot of the Hidden Realm because I want to look at that deck as well in terms of the planets. It feels like there's a lot of Venus energy in that deck, so that's one I'm going to pull out. And then when we are looking at cardinal signs, we're looking at the 2, 3, and 4. So this is air, right? So 2, 3, and 4 of swords. And this particular, and the one will look at the aspect of relationships in Venus, and not just love relationships, but all kinds of relationships. So this gives us a bigger view of the relationship between Taurus and Libra, but also different aspects of this planet, and perhaps the different ways to explore, relationships with your kids, or the things that Venus is good at, those mothering qualities and mother energy. She is seen in also numerological, it's not really numerological, it is Kabbalistic correspondence of number. The planets also correspond to one of the Sephra on the Tree of Life. And the Venus energy is at 7, at Netzach on the Tree of Life. And so we will also turn to the 7s and look at Venus in terms of the number 7 and where we can draw on that. And of course this is the 7 of Swords in this deck, and the 7 of Swords is one of the cards that is a decanic minor for the moon, which we talked about in the last workshop. So I want to endeavor as we go through these workshops to build in, the multiple planets that are associated with certain cards, and why they may repeat in that way. Okay. The other, and this is something I was just thinking about as I was pulling out cards for you today, is that 7 is associated with Venus, and the 7th major arcana is the Chariot, which is associated with the moon. So again, we have this other sort of underlying frequency of feminine energy connecting numbers as well as bringing majors together through planetary association. So I don't think this happens by accident. It's all part of a great web that has been studied and interpreted and dissected by those shoulders that we stand on, right, in studying the tarot, who really were quite extraordinary human beings. And the more that I read these older texts, and the more that I go back and take out some of the older decks and try to pull apart, and not just the decks, but the grimoires and so forth, and try to look at these images, and even perhaps some of the cartomantic associations, I think we can learn a lot. Yeah. So in Tarot Through the Planets, it's about building vocabulary, building strength in your readings. And this is not just for those who are reading for others, but I think this is going to really help as well too. That's my dog, Jamie. In reading for yourself, right? Understanding your own relationships and why certain cards are appearing up. And just because you don't get the Lover's card and the Two of Cups doesn't mean you're not going to find love in your life, right? There's lots of other cards that represent love. And of course, Venus is much more than love, and that's something that we'll discuss in great detail on Saturday. Okay? So I hope that gives you a better idea of what's going on in this series. And like I said, the dates for this series are all in the description box below. and it's approximately the first Saturday of every month. And the second of 7 workshops is on Saturday this week. Okay, so if you have any questions, please come back and be sure to write a comment down below, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thanks for being here. Namaste.